Joe. Let me quickly and formally introduce you to our audience. Glad you could join us. Joe Ruggiero, and please correct me if I'm mispronouncing your name.
It's Ruggiero. Sorry.
Ruggiero, okay. Ruggiero, okay, that's much easier. Joe Ruggiero's policy division, and with the State Personnel Board, Joe serves as a staff services manager, drafting civil service regulations, writing statewide personnel policies, and advising on legislation affecting state employees since 2019. So Joe is a policy expert. That's one of the reasons why I think it's his presentation is going to be so helpful for us. So welcome to SDAC, Joe, and the floor is yours. And if you are sharing any PowerPoint, you're welcome to do that. There are no restrictions.
Great. Thanks, Bobby. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the committee for inviting the board to provide some updates today that I hope are relevant and germane to the committee. I am going to be doing this without a PowerPoint presentation. Mea culpa, I apologize, but it's going to be pretty brief, hopefully. So for those that don't know, I just want to provide a little context for what the board is and what it does. So the State Personnel Board is the constitutional body responsible for enforcing California's civil service merit system. So, among other things, the board adopts civil service regulations, hears appeals, and then sometimes discrimination complaints from state employees and applicants, and we conduct compliance reviews of department personnel practices. So today, I just wanted to briefly cover three things that may be, relevant to this group. So first, I want to give a quick update on a regulatory change the board is currently considering related to discrimination complaint process. Second, I want to talk about an issue the committee raised regarding absence without leave or AWOL and how it relates to disability accommodation. And third, I just want to briefly share a few observations from the board's recent compliance review work in the spaces of EEO and disability advisory committees. Right. So I think let's just start with the regulatory update. We've been working on amendments to regulations that govern the discrimination complaint process for state employees and applicants. And these are complaints of discrimination, harassment, retaliation related specifically to a medical condition or a disability, a known disability. These regulations, they appear in Title II, California Code of Regulations, sections 64.1 through 64.6. So the goal of this rulemaking package that we're almost through with is pretty straightforward. We wanted to make the process, clearer, easier to follow, and more accessible for employees navigating disability-related complaints. So in developing these amendments, we look closely at how employees and departments actually navigate the complaint process in practice. And one concern we heard was that the process could sometimes be confusing or just downright slow, particularly for employees raising disability-related issues, such as denial of reasonable accommodation. So the amendments aim to clarify the procedural steps and provide a clear path to board review in these instances. So one of those changes that is obviously relevant to this group concerns complaints involving the denial of a reasonable accommodation. So under the current structure, employees go through their department's internal complaint process, usually their EEO office, before filing with the State Personnel Board. The proposed regulations change that. They clarify that, when the complaint concerns a denial of reasonable accommodation, the employee may file directly with the board if they choose to. They can still use the departmental process if they want to, but they're no longer required to do so before coming to the board. Obviously, this is after the accommodation process has started and there is a denial or a lack of movement, or there's a timing aspect to it, a 30-day timing aspect to it. The idea behind the change is pretty simple. Like in some situations, employees with disabilities can face, real hardship when accommodation requests remain unresolved for long periods of time. So allowing direct access to the board, the idea here is that allowing direct access to the board's complaint process, helps ensure that there's a clear and timely path to review, when needed. So we're expected to consider approval of this final regulatory package at the April board meeting coming up. It will still have to go to the Office of Administrative Law. I know I'm getting kind of in the weeds here, and I apologize, but that's kind of the nature of my job. And they'll review it for compliance with statute. And barring any setbacks there, it'll probably come operative sometime around October 1st, or October 1st, most likely, of this year. So then I'm going to kind of shift, not a great transition here, but to the second topic, which came up in prior discussions with, members of the committee. And that issue involves, it's kind of an issue one. It involves situations where an employee exhausts available leave and requests additional time off as a reasonable accommodation. But the department instead invokes the absence without leave, or AWOL statute. So under California Civil Service Law, an employee who's absent without leave for 5 consecutive working days may be considered to have resigned from state service. It's true, but the key point here is that the phrase "without leave" does not mean without leave balances. It means without permission to be absent, right? And so at the same time, disability accommodation law requires departments to engage in an interactive process, consider reasonable accommodations when a medical condition or disability and affects an employee's, ability to work. And in some cases, that accommodation may include unpaid leave for a defined period of time. So these two frameworks, civil service rules, disability accommodation obligations, they intersect in really complicated ways. And so this is a really thoughtful, important question. How are these handled in practice? And so our staff is going to look at this more closely, and we're going to review how the AWOL process operates, how it interacts with disability accommodation requirements, and whether there's an opportunity here to provide clear guidance for departments. And obviously, we'll be consulting with CalHR on this. This is a little bit more their wheelhouse in terms of the reasonable accommodation process, et cetera. But it is definitely something that warrants, introspection. So, again, I'm not providing any final guidance here, but this is still sort of internal, exploratory. But I just want to express that we appreciate the committee raising the issue, and we want to help highlight where confusion may exist and where clarity is needed. Okay, so then lastly, I'm going to turn to the board's recent compliance review work. I think this might be useful to the group. So in the last 2 annual reports to the legislature, the board identified a small number of EEO and disability-related deficiencies in departmental compliance reviews. So we'll step back a little bit. Essentially, what the board does is we conduct compliance reviews of every state department over a 3-year period, right? And typically, it's a pretty wide scope. We review appointments, leave, pay, EEO, DAC related issues, just a smorgasbord of things. But specifically, I'm just going to be talking about the DAC and EEO related aspects of those reviews. I lost my place. I apologize. So essentially, these findings, they don't really suggest any broad systemic issues necessarily. So they're pretty limited to a handful of departments. But they're obviously worth paying attention to because these issues have come up more than once. So first, there's the DAC compliance. It still remains an issue, right? So in the 2024 report, the board identified a few departments that had not established a DAC. And in those cases, the corrective action required them to take steps to establish DAC, right? Made up of employees who have or have an interest in disability issues. This is consistent with government code 19795. So some of the causes that the departments talk about when we cite them on these is, telework, competing priorities, staff attrition, retirements, and really just a lack of employee interest. In many instances, these departments, some of the ones that are deficient here are relatively small, so they don't have a large staff to pluck from, so to speak. I'm not saying that as an excuse. I'm just saying that is an actual, they name that as a barrier. So the 2025 report also identified DAC-related deficiencies, including departments that had not established a DAC or that didn't actively maintain one, but it was like one or two departments. So the numbers aren't large, but the issue does reoccur, right? And then second, there's complaint process timelines does remain an issue still. So the 2025 report did identify departments where complainants were not notified of the reasons for delays in decisions within the prescribed time period, and that's 90 days. So typically with the discrimination complaint process, you file a complaint, the department has to respond within 90 days. If they haven't come to determination, they have to send you a letter saying, it's delayed, we're getting to it, here's why. And in a lot of instances, they don't do that. Now, some of the causes of that are, they don't have proper tracking, things of that nature. And so this is relevant kind of because it sort of lines up with the board's current rulemaking on discrimination complaint process, right? This package that should be approved soon. So this isn't, I'm just trying to point this out because things don't happen in a vacuum here. The rulemaking responds in part to practical problems the board has seen in our compliance work, right? So third, the corrective actions that we do are pretty consistent across these reports. So when we find these kinds of problems, we expect concrete things to occur, right? So the departments have to submit a corrective action plan showing what they changed, how they're still staying compliant. So in the DAC context, that can mean establishing or reestablishing the DAC, right? And then we usually ask for, the email they sent out to solicit members, the Outlook scheduling or the agenda and meeting minutes, things of that nature, like 2 or 3 of the most recent, to concretely see that they're meeting and doing something. But it's not more qualitative than that, right? And then in the EEO context, it can mean sort of tightening up the complaint procedures, putting better tracking and monitoring systems in place. So from a compliance standpoint, a number of the deficiencies the board continues to see are about whether the department has, built internal structures and in some cases a culture that can comply with the law consistently. We come from a more compliance, legal-oriented framework, the board. So I know this, that's my perspective on it. I know there are other larger cultural perspectives here that interplay. So I want to be cognizant of that. But we recognize the importance of supporting employment of persons with disabilities and state service and the value in it. And we want to continue to improve the systems that affect access, fairness, and accountability. So as always, we welcome feedback from this group about these issues being experienced and practiced across departments. And I know I talk a little fast. I apologize. It's kind of in my nature. That's really all I have to say today. But I'm happy to answer your questions, or just I'm here to listen as well. And then hopefully I can take that back to improve my work. Anyway.
No, that was a great report. We appreciate it. You're getting a lot of emotion.
Sure.
Telling you've done a great job. So now we open it up for comments and questions. Anybody has any questions for Joe, please raise your hand or unmute and ask me or ask Joe. One of the question that came up in the chat is, in order to file a denial of reasonable accommodation complaint appeal with SPB, an employee must file with their EEO office. This will change with the new regulation. At this time, what can an employee do if they are the department's EEO officer and they want to file a denial of RA complaint with SPB? Do we need to file a complaint ourselves? That's the question.
Well, the current process is if an individual receives a denial of a reasonable accommodation request, they have to file the contesting of that with their own department, with their own EEO office or personnel office, right? And then they have time to respond, respond to that complaint. And then at that point, after you receive the response, you would be able to file with the board directly. And I think there's a 180-day time frame in there too as well, if they don't respond within that time frame. But that's a pretty significant chunk of time, right? And so the idea here is okay. If they deny at this point, you can just say, you know what, you're not going to go back to the department to rehash the denial. If they engage in the good faith interactive process, then, let's just move it to the board at that point. That's the internal logic of it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, and I know we did receive some comments about, well, is it just creating a false 30-day time frame? Well, if you're engaging the interactive process in good faith, it's less likely the employee is going to file directly with the board. They're going to see that process through, is the way we look at it. And an individual could file directly with the board, and that process can continue on the department side, right? These two things can both be true. It's kind of the way we look at it, and that's how we approach it. And when we, in our, essentially with the rulemaking packages, for those who don't know, we post the changes to text, and then people can provide written comment, and then we respond to those written comments. Generally, that comes from unions or departments, but anybody can do it. So, maybe what I could do is provide in the chat here a link to, you can subscribe to our, the boards. You'll get notices essentially via email whenever we make a rulemaking change. And that way you can read the text, read our initial statement of reasons, and understand why we're doing what we're doing, and, provide feedback. Because it's best when we only hear from departments and unions. It's not always, it's great, but it's not the whole picture.
I can't find the hand raise thing, but that was my question. And the question is, I am the EEO officer for my department. Reasonable accommodations are not under me. My reasonable accommodation was denied. So do I have to file a complaint with myself?
Okay. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. This is, because it's not necessarily always housed under EEO. It's housed under your HR office, I assume, or we had a reasonable accommodation coordinator at the PUC, obviously, and same with, it depends on the department. So what you would have to do, your department should have a process set up for you that you should be aware of as to where you would file that complaint. Is it you?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. I don't know the answer to that offhand, to be honest. Let me,
yes, I had knee replacement surgery, and I asked to telework for 7 days, and it was denied.
Okay. Yeah, that's, wow. That's an interesting question. In that instance, I think you would just file it with your reasonable accommodation court or with your HR office. Your HR office should be handling that at that point. You obviously have a conflict of interest. You cannot handle your own denial, or that would not really work out. So you would have. I mean, this is if me speculating, it would be your HR office that would handle that, right? Luckily, under the new reg, and when that becomes operative, you would just be able to file with the board. But at this time, you have to reach out to your department and find out how they want to handle that. And I think you're hopefully well positioned to do that in your role as EEO officer. Obviously that's easier said than done.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great question.
That was a great question. I saw Sarah. You have your hands up, and then I'm going to go to Alex. Sarah, go ahead. Unmute your question.
Hello. I am wondering about how other agencies are actually handling the denial process. So what I have noticed, I am the assistant EEO officer in my department. RAs are not under us. But what we've seen a lot of is the RAs, the interactive process stalls out, right? They're not, nobody's coming to an agreement. Well, it's not actually being denied. So now we have people that are just filing straight complaints with the EEO office, and for us to step in and assist, but technically nothing is denied yet. So now it falls under a complaint. So are other agencies dealing with this, or do people have policies in place for like a time span of what is good faith interaction? Is it like after 60 days, if you haven't come to an agreement?
Well, this is interesting because listen, I just want to be very clear here. The board doesn't really handle some of the laws related to the interactive process. But we do kind of speak to that in our comments, which is, listen, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to provide a written denial. In some instances, delay could constitute a denial effectively, and you could make that case in your complaint to the board, obviously under the new structure, but even under the structure we have now with your own department, right? But I want to be very careful here because there really is no timeline. It's more about it needs to be timely and made in good faith, right? Now, I think from a reasonable standard, right? And so what we were hearing, and I can't answer all of these questions. I apologize because I want to be very careful here. And it's technically, again, the reasonable accommodation process is not the board's wheelhouse. It's more CalHR side. But because of what you're describing, some of these delays, we felt that it would be more beneficial for the individual to be able to go to the board to address said grievances in a more timely manner. I kind of missed the essence of your question. I apologize.
It's really just our department is not giving people a denial, right? So like somebody's saying, I need to come in at 9 o'clock because I have, physical therapy every morning or whatever. And they're not getting that actual denial, which the denial is kind of what then leads them to be able to appeal because they're appealing a denial. But if there's no denial, in essence, there's nothing for them to appeal. Mm-hmm. So it's like a circle. But then the EEO office, we end up with just a straight complaint because nobody's the process isn't getting anywhere. So it's like this weird loophole, and I just don't know if other people.
Again, I think the federal guidance, and I think this is coming from the EOC, is that denial should be provided in writing with specific reasons for the denial.
Right, but what I'm saying is they're not denying. They're saying, well, we don't deny anything. We're still in the process, but the process can't last 90 days. That's not.
Yeah.
Well, okay. It should be a good faith interactive process that is timely, right? And so in some instances, I can't say, listen, I don't have the facts in front of me of every individual case. Can I say with confidence that it should not take 90 days? I think in most cases, if it's in good faith, 90 days does seem long, but I can't say that that couldn't be warranted in some instances, right? But we should be, I guess what I would say for the employees is we should be you can document this interactive process in terms of, and a reasonable assessment can be made as to whether it was made in good faith and in a timely fashion. This is good feedback for us in terms of what you're telling me, which is what you're telling me is, I think what you're telling me is there isn't a good faith process going on here, and then it's not being done timely. And it's essentially leaving people in this weird ether where there is no denial and there's no addressing of the accommodation itself, the request itself. Correct?
I believe one of the member from the audience gave a quite reasonable response. Under FEHA, a delay in providing an accommodation is a denial.
Well, so
no matter what you say, that there is we're doing this, doing that, but there is no decision rendered by anyone. That's under FEHA, that's denial.
Well, yeah, and we do kind of say something like that in our comments back on this rule because the question was asked what constitutes denial. We had to be very careful there because, again, it's under DEFA EOC. That guidance, it's under their jurisdiction.
Yeah.
We're simply, so I just want to be careful what do I address here. We're trying to improve and enhance and clarify the aspect of our discrimination complaint process.
Right.
What constitutes denial, I think that it's fairly reasonable what that individual said, and it aligns with our responses, which is, it doesn't necessarily have to be a written denial to constitute a denial.
Yeah.
I hope that makes,
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I just want to clarify one point. this new regulation that's going to go through the Office of Administrative Law and all that will become final and published. You expect the
I was hoping July 1st, but it's looking like because of the OAO review, it will be October 1st.
Yeah. October 1st. And that will reduce that current time frame of what, 90 days to 30 days?
Well, yeah. So what it says essentially is you can file from the date of the denial. So that could be, however long it takes them to place a denial. If it takes after 30 or 30 days, meaning after the 30th day, you can then file directly with the board if you haven't received an answer or been given a specific denial at that point.
Great. Terrific. Thank you. Yeah. That's what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Alex, go ahead if your hands up, and after that, I'm going to come to Doreen.
Oh, sure. Just two things. One's a question from the audience, and if it was mentioned, I missed it. Could you provide the Title II code, the amendment?
Yeah. Sorry, I think I said it quickly. It's California Code of Regulations, Title II, Section 64.1 through 64.5.
Okay. And then a question that might be more of a comment, but this is for me. So I believe, and I could be wrong, that the law, and I saw your comment, Eli, that you could elaborate further on RA, but this, I think, is a little bit aside. So that the law is generally that RA process must exist that is interactive. If so, then that leaves the process very open to timelines and creativity of information paths from agencies. And perhaps many of the issues, or rather questions brought up today, are a result of that, which could be refined as an overall state process. I'm not sure if you'd be able to discuss that at all. And if not, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm not trying to evade these kind of questions, but I want to be very careful that our board is not responsible in the laws or rules surrounding the reasonable accommodation process. What we're trying to do is simply be sensitive to some of the feedback we're hearing about that process. Does that make sense?
So I guess a follow-up question to that, and in that answer, is it possible to, I guess, elaborate to myself and the audience as well, SPB's role as far as maybe enforcement and what the SPB does versus how can people make change happen? Because you mentioned the laws. So, and I know that all agencies operate by rules and laws and policies. So how could the rules be changed to impact this?
Well, that's kind of my point. I mean, you'd have to look to other agencies and their rules and their laws, right? And so the board handles the merit side of hiring and selection. Obviously, this can be implicated in the denial of a reasonable accommodation process or discrimination in general, correct? Because those things impact the employee's ability to do their job, to retain their job in some instances, in the sense where there is discrimination or retaliation occurring. We would adjudicate in those instances simply because that focuses on the merit side of both hiring, of employment. Does that make sense? And so I don't know if I can speak to issues with the reasonable accommodation process. We were receiving feedback that in many instances that it was taking so long that there was no accommodation process being provided in a timely manner such that it was impacting the individual's work performance. That's a merit issue, right? And so if that's happening, we're like, well, then let them file with the board so we can maybe address it a little bit more quickly, right? And so that it doesn't negatively impact that employee. That's the narrow avenue that we can have influence within this process. Does that make sense? I have my own personal thoughts about how perhaps you could change culture and structures within the reasonable accommodation process at your departments, but I don't know if that's really germane to the authority and mission of the board. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah. We're not going to put you on the spot, Joe.
Yeah.
Well, you can answer. You can answer.
These are really good conversations. I want to be very clear here. And listen, the feedback I hear today, it's not like it's it's just in our little box. I can talk to CalHR. I can, you know what I mean? It's not like, you get what I'm saying? Yeah.
Dorina, you had your hand up, so go ahead, unmute, ask your question.
Actually, Alex asked, I wanted to know the Code of Regulations, because I'm going to go back and read that. So thank you for
asked and answered. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
No, forget it.
All right. Well, this has been a very interesting. Do we have any other questions for Joe before I thank him and say goodbye? Well, Joe, this has been a, very informative presentation. And we definitely appreciate you coming on to SDAC. And please come back and share more wealth of information soon.
I would love to. Thank you guys all for having me, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. You as well.